I thought the hardest thing I'd ever have to do was bury my parents at 21 and become a mother to my 3 siblings overnight. I was wrong. The hardest thing I've ever had to do was destroy the brother I raised, the boy I sacrificed everything for, because of what he became when no one was watching. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the monsters we fear most are the ones we invited to our dinner table. When I was 21 years old, still struggling through my junior year of university, my parents died in a car accident on a rainy October night. My father fell asleep at the wheel driving home from my mother's birthday dinner. They hit a concrete barrier on the highway at 70 miles per hour. My mother died instantly. My father died 3 hours later in the ICU while I held his hand and lied to him that Mom was okay, that she was waiting for him, because the doctors told me he wouldn't survive the truth. In the span of one night, I went from being a college student worried about midterms and rent to being the legal guardian of 3 children: John, who was 18 and a senior in high school; Michael, who was 15 and just starting to figure out who he was; and Janet, who was 12 and still believed in fairy tales. John took it the hardest. He was a daddy's boy through and through, played baseball because Dad coached Little League, studied engineering because Dad was an engineer, even wore the same cologne Dad wore. After the funeral, I found him in our parents' closet at 2 in the morning, Dad's jacket wrapped around his shoulders, sobbing so hard he was hyperventilating. I crawled in there with him, held him until the sun came up, and promised him we'd be okay. That I'd take care of him. That we were still a family. I meant it. God, I meant every word. Our parents had been responsible, thank God. They left a sizable inheritance. Not enough to be rich, but enough to pay for the house, cover expenses, and fund education if we were smart about it. I deferred my own graduation by a year to make sure I could be home when my siblings needed me. I worked 2 part-time jobs, managed the household finances, attended every parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, every debate tournament. I learned to cook more than ramen. I learned to forge my dad's signature on permission slips. I learned to be an adult when I still felt like a child myself. But we survived. More than survived, we became something stronger than we were before. Michael discovered he was brilliant at mathematics and earned a full scholarship to university. Janet blossomed into this confident, articulate young woman who wanted to be a lawyer like our mother. And John met Emily in his sophomore year of college, a sweet, soft-spoken girl from his biology class who made him laugh again. Watching him fall in love was like watching winter finally end. They got married when John was 25. I walked him down the aisle because Dad couldn't. Emily wore my mother's pearl earrings because her own mother had passed away when she was young, another orphan finding family, just like we had found each other. At the reception, John pulled me aside, tears in his eyes, and thanked me. He said he wouldn't have made it without me. That I'd saved his life when I chose to keep our family together. I believed him. I believed we had survived the worst thing that could ever happen to us. 2 years later, they had a daughter. They named her Grace, and she was perfect. Dark curls like John, gentle brown eyes like Emily. I became Aunt Sarah, the cool aunt who let Grace stay up late and eat cookies before dinner. My husband, David, and I didn't have children yet, so Grace filled that space in my heart I didn't know was empty. We established a tradition early on. Once a month, everyone came to my house for dinner. Michael and Janet still lived with David and me during their school breaks, so it was just John, Emily, and Grace who had to drive the hour from their home to ours. But John never missed it. Not once in 5 years. We were healing. We were whole. We were the family I had fought so hard to build from the ashes of the worst night of my life. And then, during one of those monthly dinners, I started noticing things I couldn't unsee. It was subtle at first. So subtle I told myself I was imagining it. It was a Sunday in March, one of those early spring days where the weather can't decide what it wants to be. We were having dinner. I'd made pot roast, Dad's old recipe that I'd finally perfected after years of trying. Everyone was there, David and me, Michael home from his final year of university, Janet visiting from her campus 2 hours away, and John's family. Grace was 6 years old then, in kindergarten, obsessed with dinosaurs and the color purple. She was telling me about a T-Rex project she was making at school when John reached across the table for the salt. His hand brushed Emily's shoulder. Nothing aggressive. Just a casual touch. She flinched. It was barely perceptible, a tiny recoil, a tightening of her shoulders, a flash of something across her face that was gone as quickly as it appeared. But I saw it. And when I looked at her more closely, I noticed she was sitting strangely, slightly twisted in her chair, as if sitting straight caused her pain. "Emily, are you okay?" I asked. "You look uncomfortable." She smiled immediately. Too immediately. "I'm fine. Just slept wrong last night. You know how it is." John laughed, but there was an edge to it I didn't recognize. "She's been complaining about her back all week. I told her to see a doctor, but she's stubborn." "I don't need a doctor for a stiff back," Emily said quietly, her eyes on her plate. She hadn't looked at John once during the entire exchange. The conversation moved on. Michael was talking about his thesis. Janet was teasing him about his girlfriend. David was asking John about his new job promotion. Normal family dinner stuff. But I couldn't stop watching Emily. The way she held herself so carefully. The way she barely ate. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes. When dinner ended and we moved to the living room, Grace crawled into my lap while the adults talked. She was warm and solid and real, and she smelled like the strawberry shampoo Emily used on her hair. "Aunt Sarah," she whispered, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, sweetie." She leaned close to my ear. "Sometimes Daddy gets really loud at home." My heart skipped. "Loud how?" "He yells at Mommy. And Mommy cries in the bathroom." She pulled back, those big brown eyes so serious. "But Daddy says it's a secret. We don't tell people about family business." Before I could respond, John called from across the room. "Grace, come here. It's time to go." She scrambled off my lap immediately, the tension in her little body palpable. She went to her father without a word, without looking back at me. I watched them leave that night with a sick feeling in my stomach. David asked me what was wrong when they were gone, and I told him. He frowned. Thoughtful. "Maybe it's just stress," he suggested. "New job, raising a kid, money pressures, couples fight." "Michael and I fought when he was Grace's age," I admitted. "Teenagers are hard. Maybe I'm reading too much into it." But I didn't believe that. And I don't think David did either. Over the next few months, I started paying closer attention during our family dinners. What I saw made my skin crawl. In April, Emily arrived wearing a turtleneck despite the 70-degree weather. When she reached up to get a glass from my cabinet, the sleeve slipped down, and I saw a bracelet of bruises around her wrist. Perfect finger-shaped bruises. "Emily, what happened to your arm?" She pulled her sleeve down so fast she almost dropped the glass. "Oh, I got tangled in the dog leash at the park. You know how Bruno gets when he sees squirrels." They didn't have a dog. They'd never had a dog. Emily was allergic. I opened my mouth to call her on the lie, but John walked into the kitchen at that exact moment. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, smiling, but his eyes were on Emily. Only on Emily. "Fine," she said quickly. "Just grabbing water." She left the kitchen. John stayed behind, pulling a beer from my fridge. "You know, Sarah, Emily's been really stressed lately. Sometimes she says things that don't make sense. I think she needs to see someone. A therapist, maybe." He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "If she tells you anything weird, just remember she's not herself these days." That was the first time I felt genuine fear. Not concern. Not worry. Fear. Because that was gaslighting. Textbook gaslighting. planting seeds in my mind to doubt Emily before she could tell me the truth. In May, they arrived late. John apologized, said Emily had one of her episodes, and they had to wait for her to calm down. Emily's eyes were red and swollen, her hands were shaking, and there was a fresh bruise on her cheekbone that she tried to cover with makeup. "I'm fine," she whispered when I pulled her aside. "I just fell. I'm so clumsy lately." But Grace barely spoke during dinner. She sat close to her mother, watching her father with wide, wary eyes. And when John stood up suddenly to grab another drink, Grace actually jumped. 6-year-olds don't jump at their fathers unless they've learned to be afraid. After they left that night, I went to David. "Something is wrong. Really wrong. I think John is hurting Emily." David was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure? John's your brother. You raised him. Do you really think he's capable of that?" "I don't know anymore. But I know what I'm seeing." "What do you want to do?" "I want to talk to Emily. Alone." But Emily wouldn't take my calls. I tried 3 times over the next week. She texted back once, "I'm fine. Just busy. Talk soon." We didn't talk soon. In June, they didn't come to dinner at all. John called an hour before they were supposed to arrive. "Emily's sick. Some kind of stomach thing. We're going to stay home." "Is she okay? Do you need me to bring anything?" No. She just needs rest. I'm taking good care of her." There was something in his voice. Something proprietary. Possessive. Like Emily was a thing he owned rather than a person he loved. "Can I talk to her?" "She's sleeping. I'll have her call you tomorrow." She never called. I drove to their house the next day anyway. It was a Wednesday, mid-morning. John should have been at work. His car was in the driveway. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Through the front window, I could see into the living room. It was pristine. Spotless. Not the comfortable mess of a house where a 6-year-old lived. It looked staged. Controlled. The door finally opened. John stood there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, unshaven, looking annoyed. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to check on Emily." "I told you she's sick. She doesn't need visitors." "I'm not a visitor. I'm family." Something dark flickered across his face. "She's sleeping. You should have called first." "I did call. She didn't answer." "Because she's sick, Sarah." "Jesus. Can you not take a hint?" Before I could respond, I heard it. A small sound from somewhere deeper in the house. A whimper. A child's whimper. "Is that Grace? Is she sick too?" "No. She's fine. Playing in her room." That didn't sound like playing. John's jaw tightened. "You need to go." "I want to see them. Emily and Grace. Just for a minute." "No." We stood there in the doorway, staring at each other. This was my baby brother. The boy I'd rocked to sleep when he had nightmares after our parents died. The teenager I'd taught to shave, to drive, to apply for colleges. The young man I'd walked down the aisle. I didn't recognize him anymore. "If you don't leave right now," he said quietly, "I'm going to call the police and tell them you're harassing my family." "John." "Now, Sarah." He shut the door in my face. I stood there for a full minute, shaking with rage and fear and disbelief. Then I got back in my car and drove home in tears. That night, I told David everything. Every suspicion, every weird moment, every red flag I'd ignored because I didn't want to believe my brother, who I'd raised, who I'd saved, could be capable of hurting the people he was supposed to protect. "We need to do something," I said. "Like what?" "We don't have proof. If you call CPS or the police without evidence, John will cut you off completely. You'll never see them again, and Emily and Grace will be more isolated than ever. He was right. I hated that he was right. So what do I do? You wait. You watch. And when the opportunity comes, you document everything. July came. No word from John's family. My calls went unanswered. My texts were ignored. Michael graduated and moved back home to start a job in the city. Janet came home for summer break. Our house was full of life and noise and normalcy. But I couldn't stop thinking about Emily and Grace. I couldn't sleep. I lost weight. David started to worry about me. You're obsessing, he said gently. A 6-year-old is living with a man who scares her. How am I supposed to not obsess? I drove past their house twice a week, just to see if I could catch Emily outside. I never did. The house always looked perfect from the outside. Flowers blooming in the garden. American flag on the porch. Picture-perfect suburban life. It made me sick. In August, my phone rang at 2 in the morning. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello, Sarah. It was Emily. Her voice was barely a whisper. I need help. I was out of bed instantly. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm at home. John went to Atlanta for a work conference. He'll be back tomorrow night, but Sarah, I can't do this anymore. I can't. She was crying. I could hear Grace crying in the background. I'm coming right now. Pack a bag. Grab Grace. I'll be there in an hour. I can't leave. He'll find me. He always finds me. My blood ran cold. Always. Emily, have you tried to leave before? Silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. Twice. He found me both times. Brought me back. It was worse after. I wanted to scream. I wanted to put my fist through a wall. Instead, I kept my voice calm and steady. Then we won't let him find you this time. Pack a bag. Important documents, birth certificates, social security cards, any money you can access. We'll figure out the rest later. I'm leaving right now. Sarah, he'll be so angry. I don't care. Let him be angry at me. I'm coming. I threw on clothes, grabbed my keys. David was already awake, pulling on shoes. I'm driving, he said. You're too emotional. We made it to John's house in 43 minutes. Every light in the house was on. The front door opened before I could knock. Emily stood there with a duffel bag in one hand and Grace's hand in the other. Grace was in pajamas, clutching a stuffed dinosaur, her face streaked with tears. Emily looked like a ghost. Hollow eyes. Bruises on her arms, her neck, her face. So many bruises, she hadn't even tried to hide them. She was wearing shorts and a tank top, and I could see finger-shaped marks on her thighs. A burn mark on her shoulder that looked like it came from a cigarette. Oh my God, I breathed. It's worse than it looks, she said numbly. Then she started to cry. That's a lie. It's exactly as bad as it looks. I pulled her into my arms, Grace sandwiched between us, and I felt her entire body shaking. You're safe now. I promise. You're safe. We got them in the car. David drove while I sat in the back with Emily and Grace. Emily held my hand so tightly I lost circulation, but I didn't care. How long? I asked. Since Grace was a baby. It started small. Shoving during arguments. Grabbing my arms too hard. Then it got worse. After he got promoted last year, it got so much worse. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She laughed, but it was a broken sound. He said no one would believe me. That you'd choose him over me because he's your blood. That everyone would think I was crazy or lying or asking for it. And I believed him. I believed him because every time I tried to tell someone, a friend, my sister, my coworker, he'd find out. And he'd make me pay for it. He won't hurt you again. I swear on our parents' graves, he will never touch you again. We got back to my house at 4 in the morning. I set Emily and Grace up in the guest room, gave them clean clothes, made them tea. Grace fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted. Emily and I sat in my kitchen while David dozed on the couch. "Tell me everything," I said. And she did. Emily talked until the sun came up. And with every word, my heart broke a little more. It started 6 months after they got married. They'd had an argument about money, something small, insignificant. John had grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises, then immediately apologized. Cried. Said he didn't know what came over him, that he'd never do it again. She believed him. But he did do it again. And again. Each time followed by apologies, flowers, promises to change. When Emily got pregnant with Grace, he stopped for a while. He was excited about being a father. Gentle. Attentive. Emily thought maybe they'd turned a corner. 3 months after Grace was born, sleep-deprived and stressed, John slapped Emily across the face during an argument about the baby crying. She left that night, went to her sister's house 2 states away. John showed up 2 days later. Charming. Devastated. Begging. He convinced her sister that Emily was experiencing postpartum depression, that she was paranoid and irrational. Her sister believed him. Sent Emily home with him. He locked her in their bedroom for 3 days as punishment. No food. No phone. Just water and a bathroom. Grace was with a babysitter. Emily screamed until her voice gave out. When he finally let her out, he told her if she ever tried to leave again, he'd make sure she never saw Grace again. That he'd tell everyone she was an unfit mother. That he'd have her committed. She believed him. For 6 years, she lived in that house like a prisoner. He controlled everything. Her phone, her money, her friends, her family. He monitored her calls. Checked her texts. Tracked her location. If she took too long at the grocery store, he'd accuse her of cheating. If she talked to another man, even the mailman, he'd punish her. The punishments varied. Sometimes it was just yelling. Sometimes it was days of silent treatment. Sometimes it was physical, pushing, grabbing, hitting, burning. Once, he choked her until she passed out because she'd burned dinner. Grace had witnessed most of it. And in the last year, John had started directing his anger toward Grace too. Nothing physical yet, but Emily had seen him grab Grace's arm hard enough to leave marks. Had heard him scream in her face until she was sobbing and hyperventilating. That's when Emily knew she had to get out. She could survive the abuse for herself, but she couldn't let Grace grow up thinking this was normal. Thinking this was love. "I tried to leave again 3 months ago," she whispered. "I took Grace to a women's shelter while John was at work. They were going to help me file a restraining order. But John has connections. He's charming. Everyone loves him. He has friends at the police department from his softball league. He found out where I was within hours. Showed up at the shelter with cops. Told them I'd kidnapped Grace, that I was mentally unstable. And they believed him? He had evidence. Text messages I'd supposedly sent to friends about hearing voices. Medical records showing I'd been prescribed antidepressants after Grace was born. He'd fabricated all of it or taken things out of context, and he presented it so convincingly. The shelter staff didn't know what to believe. They couldn't legally keep me if I wasn't there voluntarily, and John convinced them I needed to come home for Grace's safety. She started crying again. I tried to tell them. I showed them bruises. But John said I'd gotten them from falling downstairs because I was disoriented. He cried, "Sarah." He cried in front of those cops and told them he was scared for me, that he just wanted to get me help. And they believed him. What happened when he got you home? Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He broke my wrist. Told me if I ever tried to leave again, next time he'd break my neck and make it look like an accident. I was going to vomit. I excused myself, went to the bathroom, and dry heaved over the toilet. My brother. My baby brother, who I'd held through nightmares and heartbreak and grief. The boy who'd cried at our parents' funeral and promised he'd make them proud. He was a monster. When I came back, Emily was staring at her hands. There's more, she said. More. He's been inappropriate with Grace. Not sexual, but invasive. He makes her sit on his lap even when she doesn't want to. Insists on bathing her even though she's old enough to bathe herself. Gets angry if she locks her bedroom door. I'm terrified of what comes next. I'm terrified that one day she couldn't finish. She didn't have to. He'll never touch her again, I said. Either of you. I promise. Sarah, you can't stop him. I've tried everything. Shelters, lawyers, police. He's too smart, too careful. No one believes me. I believe you. And this time, we're going to do this right. The first thing I did was take Emily and Grace to the hospital. We went to a hospital 2 counties over, somewhere John wouldn't have connections. I explained the situation to the intake nurse, who immediately got a social worker and a forensic nurse examiner involved. They documented everything. Every bruise, every burn, every scar. They took photographs. They asked Emily questions using protocols designed to identify domestic violence. They were kind and professional and believed every word she said. The forensic nurse gave me a copy of the report. This will hold up in court, she said quietly. This is clear evidence of prolonged physical abuse. They also evaluated Grace. No physical abuse, but signs of severe anxiety and trauma. The child psychologist who spoke with her said Grace exhibited symptoms consistent with living in a violent household: hypervigilance, fear responses, parentification. We filed a police report. Not in John's jurisdiction, where he had friends, but in mine. I was calm and methodical. I provided the medical reports, Emily's testimony, photographs. The detective assigned to the case was a woman in her 40s named Lisa Martinez who'd worked domestic violence cases for 15 years. This is going to be hard, Detective Martinez told us. Abusers like your brother are often very good at manipulating systems. He'll have a story. He'll have people who vouch for him. You need to be prepared for this to get ugly. I know. Good. Because we need more than medical reports. We need a pattern. We need witnesses. We need documentation. Over the next week, while Emily and Grace stayed in my guest room, we built the case. First, we went through Emily's phone. John had monitored it closely, but Emily had learned to be sneaky. She'd been screenshotting his abusive texts and emailing them to a secret account John didn't know about. Hundreds of messages, threats, insults, control tactics, gaslighting. One message from 2 months earlier: if you ever try to leave me again, I'll kill you and tell everyone it was a suicide. Everyone knows you're crazy. Another: Grace doesn't need a mother like you. I should take her away from you permanently. We printed all of it. Then we talked to neighbors. Most hadn't seen anything. John was too careful for that. But one, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen who lived next door, told Detective Martinez that she'd heard screaming from the house multiple times. Once, she'd called the police herself after hearing what sounded like furniture breaking and a woman crying for help. What happened when the police came? Martinez asked. That nice young man answered the door, said everything was fine. His wife had dropped a bookshelf, and he was just upset about the damage. The officers looked around, didn't see anything wrong, left. But I never believed him.
That girl, Emily, she had fear in her eyes every time I saw her.
We got Mrs. Chen's statement in writing. We talked to Emily's former co-worker from before she'd quit her job, at John's insistence, 3 years ago. The co-worker remembered Emily coming to work with bruises, wearing long sleeves in summer, flinching when her phone rang. I asked her once if everything was okay at home, the co-worker said. She started crying and begged me not to tell anyone. She said if John found out she'd told someone, he'd make her quit. 2 weeks later, she quit anyway. Statement documented. We talked to Grace's kindergarten teacher, who said Grace had shown signs of stress, regression in behavior, reluctance to go home, drawings that depicted a large dark figure looming over smaller figures. I filed a report with CPS last year, the teacher admitted. Grace drew a picture of her family, and her father was colored entirely in black with red eyes. When I asked her about it, she said, "Daddy gets scary sometimes." But when CPS visited the home, everything looked perfect. They closed the case. I wanted to scream. The system had failed them. Everyone had failed them. But not anymore. Detective Martinez brought everything to the DA's office. The DA was skeptical at first. John had no prior arrests, no record, a good job, a pristine reputation. But the medical evidence was undeniable. The pattern was clear. And the screenshots of his threats were damning. "We can get a warrant for his arrest," the DA said. "But I need you to understand that this is going to trial. He'll get a lawyer. He'll fight back. Are you prepared for that?" I looked at Emily, who was sitting beside me holding Grace's hand. Grace was playing with a dinosaur toy, oblivious to the adult conversation happening around her. "I'm prepared to do whatever it takes," I said. We waited until John came home from his conference. I wanted him to arrive at an empty house. I wanted him to feel the panic Emily had felt for 6 years. True to form, he called me an hour after he must have arrived home. It was 8 p.m. on a Friday. "Sarah." His voice was tight, controlled.
"Where's my family?"
"Safe." "What the hell does that mean? Where's Emily?
"Where's Grace?" "They're not coming back, John."
Silence.
"Then, you took them."
"I didn't take them. Emily left you. She came to me for help." "She's confused. She's sick, Sarah. I've been trying to get her help, but she won't listen. She needs medication."
"She needs."
"Stop. Don't insult my intelligence with that gaslighting bullshit."
"I know what you've been doing to her."
"You don't know anything. Emily's been telling you lies, hasn't she? She does that. Makes up stories for attention. I've been trying to protect her from herself. I've seen the bruises, John. I've seen the medical reports.
"I know everything."
His voice changed. Got colder. "You need to bring them back right now."
"No."
"Sarah, I'm warning you. Don't interfere in my marriage.
This is between me and my wife."
"Your wife? She's terrified of you. Grace is terrified of you. You're a fucking monster. I'm your brother. I'm your family.
"You owe me." "I don't owe you shit."
"I'll call the police. I'll report them kidnapped." "Go ahead." "I've already filed a police report for domestic violence and child endangerment. There's a warrant out for your arrest. So please, call the police.
Make it easier for them to find you."
Another silence. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was shaking. "You don't understand what you've done. You just destroyed our family. Michael and Janet will never forgive you for this. Michael and Janet know the truth.
They're on my side."
That wasn't entirely true yet. I hadn't told my youngest siblings everything, but I would. Soon. "You self-righteous bitch. You always thought you were better than everyone else just because you had to play mommy for a few years. Well, congratulations, Sarah. You've officially lost a brother. I hope it was worth it. It was worth it if Emily and Grace are safe. He hung up. I sat there shaking, David's arm around my shoulders. My phone rang again immediately. I didn't answer. John called 6 more times. Then he started texting. You're going to regret this. You turned my own family against me. I did everything for this family, and this is how you repay me? You're just like Dad. You think you're so perfect, but you're a controlling bitch. Fine. Keep them. I don't need them anyway. Tell Emily she's a fucking whore and Grace will grow up to hate her. I saved every message. Detective Martinez had told me to keep my phone on in case he incriminated himself further. He certainly was. Around midnight, my doorbell rang. I looked through the window. John's car was in my driveway. He was standing on my porch, pounding on the door. Sarah, open the fucking door. I know they're in there. David called the police while I stood frozen in the hallway. Michael came downstairs in his pajamas, took one look at my face, and understood. That's John. Yeah. Jesus. The pounding continued. Sarah, you can't keep my daughter from me. That's illegal. Open this door right now. I heard Emily's voice from upstairs. Don't open it. Please don't open it. I won't, I called back. Michael stood beside me, arms crossed. Want me to go out there? No. Police are coming. John started screaming. You're all traitors. All of you. I sacrificed everything for this family after Mom and Dad died, and this is how you treat me? Sarah, you ruined my life. That stung. But I didn't move. The police arrived 7 minutes later. I watched through the window as they approached John. He immediately switched modes, became calm, charming, confused. Officers, thank God you're here. My wife and daughter are in that house. My sister won't let me see them. I think she's having some kind of breakdown. Sir, there's a warrant for your arrest. Please turn around and put your hands behind your back. What? A warrant for? This is insane. What are the charges? Domestic violence, aggravated assault, child endangerment. That's absolutely ridiculous. I've never. This is a misunderstanding. My wife is mentally unstable. She's making up lies. Sir, turn around. Hands behind your back. Now. I watched them handcuff my brother. Watched him struggle and shout. Watched him see me through the window and scream, You did this. You destroyed everything. Yes, I did. And I'd do it again. The next morning, I sat Michael and Janet down and told them everything. Every detail Emily had shared. Every bruise I'd seen. Every terrifying moment. Janet cried. Michael got very, very quiet, the way he does when he's processing something traumatic. I didn't see it, Michael finally said. How did I not see it? He was careful. He hid it well. He's our brother. I know. What's going to happen to him? He's going to prison if I have anything to say about it. Janet looked up at me with red eyes. Good. I hope he rots. Michael took longer to come around. He'd always looked up to John, admired him. The idea that his role model was an abuser shattered something in him. But after he talked to Emily himself, after he heard her story directly, he understood. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, he told Emily quietly. I should have seen it. It's not your fault, she said. He fooled everyone. That's what abusers do. The news spread through our extended family quickly. Some people believed Emily immediately. Others, mostly John's friends, people who'd only ever seen his charming public persona, thought she was lying. That I had manipulated her. That this was some kind of revenge plot because of old sibling rivalry. John's best friend called me a vindictive bitch on Facebook. Said I was tearing the family apart over a marital disagreement. I blocked him. My mother's sister, Aunt Carol, called me in tears. How could you do this to John? After everything you've been through as a family? He needs support right now, not prison. He beat his wife, Carol. He terrorized a 6-year-old child. That's Emily's word against his. You don't know what goes on in a marriage. Maybe she provoked him. Maybe. I hung up on her. We haven't spoken since. But most people, once they heard the full story, believed Emily. Supported her. Our neighbor 2 doors down, who I barely knew, brought over a casserole and a card that said, "You did the right thing." John's lawyer contacted me a week after his arrest. Wanted to discuss the situation. I told him to go fuck himself and hung up. He called back, more professional this time, and said John was willing to agree to a divorce and shared custody if Emily dropped the charges. Absolutely not, Emily said when I told her. He doesn't get to negotiate his way out of this. Good. That's what I told him. John made bail after 5 days. His lawyer argued he wasn't a flight risk, had strong community ties, blah blah blah. The judge agreed with a $50,000 bond and an order to stay away from Emily, Grace, and my house. He violated the restraining order 3 times in the first month. Once, he showed up at Grace's new school. We'd transferred her to a school in my district and tried to check her out early. The school called the police. He was arrested again. Once, he sent Emily flowers at her new therapist's office. The card said, "I still love you. Please come home." She called Detective Martinez. He got another violation on his record. Once, he created a fake Facebook profile and sent Emily messages begging her to drop the charges, saying he'd change, that he couldn't live without her. We screenshotted everything and gave it to the DA. Another violation. Each violation made his legal situation worse. And I was glad. The trial took place 11 months after John's arrest. 11 months of Emily rebuilding her life. 11 months of Grace going to therapy and slowly learning to smile again. 11 months of me wrestling with the fact that I'd put my own brother in jail. But I'd watched Emily blossom in that time. She got a job at a bookstore. Started taking art classes. Made friends. Laughed. Actually laughed. A sound I'd never really heard from her before. And Grace. God, Grace was a different child. She was chatty now, energetic, silly. She started playing with other kids without fear. She stopped having nightmares every night. Her drawings were full of color and sunshine instead of dark figures. That's how I knew I'd made the right choice. John's trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented the medical evidence, the photographs, Emily's testimony, the text messages, the witness statements. It was overwhelming, undeniable. John's defense tried to argue that Emily was an unreliable witness due to mental health issues. They presented the antidepressant prescription from 6 years ago. Tried to paint her as unstable, vindictive, someone who'd fabricated everything to win a custody battle. But the prosecution had too much evidence. It wasn't just Emily's word anymore. It was doctors, teachers, neighbors, forensic evidence. When Emily took the stand, she was incredible. Calm. Detailed. She described years of abuse without crying, without faltering. She looked John straight in the eye and told the truth. John's lawyer tried to break her down. Isn't it true that you were prescribed antidepressants for postpartum psychosis? I was prescribed antidepressants for postpartum depression, not psychosis. There's a difference. Isn't it true that you've attempted to leave your husband multiple times, suggesting an unstable pattern of behavior? I attempted to leave my husband multiple times because he was beating me. That's not unstable. That's survival. Did you ever hit your husband back? Once. He was choking me and I scratched his face trying to get him off. He used those scratches to tell people I was violent. So you admit to being violent. I admit to defending myself from being murdered. The jury was riveted. I could see it in their faces. They believed her. When the prosecution called me to the stand, I testified about what I'd witnessed. The flinching, the bruises, the fear in Grace's eyes, the way John had tried to isolate Emily from our family. John's lawyer tried to suggest I had ulterior motives. Isn't it true that you've always been controlling of your siblings? That you've always needed to be the center of attention as the family matriarch? I raised my siblings after our parents died because someone had to. That's not control. That's responsibility. Isn't it true that you were jealous of your brother's marriage? That you wanted to maintain control over him? I wanted my brother to be happy. I celebrated his marriage. I loved Emily like a sister. This isn't about control. It's about protecting someone who was being abused. So you admit you took matters into your own hands instead of letting the proper authorities handle it. The proper authorities failed Emily twice. I made sure they didn't fail her again. When Grace's therapist testified about the trauma Grace had experienced, I watched 2 jurors wipe their eyes. When Mrs. Chen testified about the screaming she'd heard, I saw others taking notes. And when the forensic nurse described the extent of Emily's injuries, the old fractures that had healed incorrectly, the scar tissue, the cigarette burns, I watched the jury's faces harden. John took the stand in his own defense. It was a mistake. He tried to play the victim. Said Emily had made his life hell with her mental health issues. That he'd stayed with her out of love and duty even though she was unstable and difficult. That he'd never laid a hand on her in anger, that her injuries were self-inflicted or accidental. The prosecution destroyed him. They showed the text messages where he'd threatened her. Played the voicemail he'd left on my phone where he'd called Emily a fucking whore. Presented evidence that he'd deliberately isolated Emily from friends and family, controlled her finances, monitored her communications. Mr. Whitman, if you never hurt your wife, why did you tell her, and I quote, "If you ever try to leave me again, I'll kill you and tell everyone it was a suicide"? That was taken out of context. I was upset. People say things they don't mean. People say they'll murder their wives and don't mean it. It was hyperbole. Did you mean it when you told her, Grace doesn't need a mother like you? I was concerned about Emily's mental state affecting our daughter. Did you mean it when you broke her wrist? I never broke her wrist. She fell. Medical records indicate a spiral fracture consistent with twisting force, not a fall. She's lying. Is Mrs. Chen lying when she says she heard your wife screaming for help? She's an old woman. She probably misheard. Are the police lying when they documented 3 restraining order violations? Those were misunderstandings. Is the forensic nurse lying when she documented 19 separate injuries in various stages of healing? Emily bruises easily. On and on. Every answer made him look worse. By the time he stepped down, even his own lawyer looked defeated. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. John was sentenced to 15 years in prison. With good behavior, he might get out in 10. But for now, he was gone. Emily cried when the judge read the sentence. Not sad tears. Relief tears. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." I held her hand. "It's over." Grace was in the courtroom too. We'd wanted to shield her from it, but the judge had allowed her to be present for the sentencing. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she understood enough. "Daddy's not coming home?" she asked Emily later. Not for a very long time, sweetheart. Good. I don't want him to. That broke my heart and healed it at the same time. John tried to make eye contact with me as they led him away in handcuffs. I didn't look at him. I had nothing left to say to him. His friends, the ones who defended him, who'd called Emily a liar, who'd said I was vindictive, went silent on social media. A few even reached out to apologize. I didn't respond. Their apologies meant nothing. Aunt Carol sent a long email about forgiveness and family and how I'd live to regret tearing the family apart. I deleted it without responding. Some people will never understand that choosing to protect an abuser isn't loyalty, it's complicity. But most of our family rallied around Emily and Grace. My house became a hub of healing. Michael and Janet doted on Grace. David built her a treehouse in our backyard. Emily started smiling more, sleeping better, existing without fear. 6 months after the sentencing, Emily and Grace moved into their own apartment. Not far from us, just 20 minutes away, but their own space. A fresh start. Thank you, Emily told me the day she moved in. For believing me. For fighting for us. For not choosing him just because he's your blood.
He stopped being my brother the moment he put his hands on you.
He was still your brother. You raised him. That must have been so hard. What would have been harder is living with myself if I'd done nothing. She hugged me. Grace ran past us chasing a butterfly, laughing, and I thought, this is what matters. Not DNA. Not shared history. But protecting the people who need it. Choosing what's right over what's easy. 2 years after John's sentencing, Grace turned 8. We threw her a big birthday party at my house. Our entire family, Emily's sister who'd flown in from across the country, Grace's new friends from school, neighbors who become surrogate family. Grace was thriving. Happy. Healthy. She still saw a therapist occasionally, but the nightmares were gone. The hypervigilance had faded. She was just a kid being a kid. Emily had started dating someone, a gentle, patient man who worked at the library where she'd started volunteering. He treated her with kindness and respect. Treated Grace like she hung the moon. I'd never seen Emily so content. Michael had gotten married the previous summer. Janet was in law school, top of her class, determined to help abuse survivors navigate the legal system. Our family had survived. Had grown. Had healed. John sent letters from prison. At first, they came weekly. Angry screeds blaming me, Emily, the justice system, everyone but himself for his situation. I never responded. Emily never read them. Eventually, the letters changed. Became more introspective. He claimed to be in therapy, working on himself, understanding what he'd done wrong. Emily's lawyer said it was likely a ploy to help with an eventual parole hearing, show the board he'd been rehabilitated. Do you think he's actually changed? Emily asked me once. I don't know. And it doesn't matter. He doesn't get access to you or Grace ever again. That's not negotiable. What if he gets out early? What if he comes looking for us? Then we'll deal with it. Together. But you're not alone anymore, Emily. You have all of us. One of John's letters was addressed to me. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Sarah, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe me. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry for what I did. I was so angry after Mom and Dad died. Angry at the world, angry at God, angry that I had to grow up so fast. I never dealt with it. I just buried it, and it rotted inside me, and I took it out on Emily. On Grace. On people who didn't deserve it. You were right to turn me in. You saved them. Maybe you saved me too, even though it doesn't feel that way from in here. I know I can never undo what I've done. I know you probably hate me. I just wanted you to know that some part of the brother you raised is still in here, buried under all the damage. And that part is ashamed. And sorry. And wishes he could go back and be the person you thought he was. I don't expect a response. I just needed to say it. John. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it up, put it in a box with all the other documentation from the case, and filed it away. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he didn't. Maybe prison had genuinely forced him to confront what he'd become. Or maybe it was manipulation, an attempt to ease his conscience or improve his parole chances. It didn't matter. Because Emily and Grace were safe. They were healing. They were building lives free from fear and pain. And I'd made that possible. Not by being a perfect sister. Not by preventing the abuse. I'd failed at that, had missed the signs for years. But by believing Emily when she finally reached out. By fighting for her when the systems designed to protect her had failed. By choosing her and Grace over my own grief about losing a brother. It's been 5 years since John went to prison. Grace is 11 now. She wants to be a veterinarian. She's confident, compassionate, brilliant. She calls me Aunt Sarah and Emily Mom, and she knows her father is somewhere far away, but she doesn't ask about him. She's made her peace. Emily just bought her own house. David and I helped with the down payment, but she's paying the mortgage herself. She's independent, strong. Nothing like the haunted woman who showed up on my doorstep that night. I'm 38 now. David and I have a son, Thomas, named after my father. He's 3, and Grace adores him. Our families have dinner together every Sunday. Sometimes it's at my house. Sometimes at Emily's. We're building new traditions, new memories. Michael brings his wife and their newborn daughter. Janet brings her girlfriend. The house is loud and chaotic and full of life. John is still in prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 3 more years. Emily's already prepared for that possibility. Restraining orders in place, security system installed, lawyer on retainer. But she's not afraid anymore. Neither am I. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. If I regret destroying my relationship with my brother. If I regret sending him to prison. The answer is no. Not for a second. Because I didn't destroy anything. John did that himself, with every hit, every threat, every moment of terror he inflicted on people who loved him. I just made sure he faced consequences. And in doing so, I learned what family really means. It's not blood. It's not obligation. It's not protecting people just because you share DNA. Family is choosing to show up for people who need you. It's believing them when they tell you they're hurting. It's doing the hard, ugly, painful thing because it's right, even when it costs you something precious. I lost a brother. But I gained something more important. The knowledge that I could look at myself in the mirror and know I'd done everything in my power to protect someone who couldn't protect herself. Emily told me recently that she wants to train as a domestic violence counselor. To help other women who are where she was. To be the person she wishes she'd had when she first tried to leave. You were that person for me, she said. But not everyone has a Sarah. Then we'll be that for them, I told her. Together. Grace overheard us. I want to help too when I'm older, she said. I want to make sure no other kids have to be scared of their dads. And I thought about my parents. About how they'd raised us to be kind, to be strong, to stand up for what's right. About how they'd have been devastated by what John became, but proud of what Emily and I had survived. I thought about the night I'd held 18-year-old John in our parents' closet and promised him we'd be okay. How I'd meant it. How I'd tried so hard to keep that promise. I'd kept it. Just not in the way I'd expected. We were okay. All of us. Everyone except John. And sometimes that's how it has to be. Sometimes the person destroying the family has to be removed to save everyone else. Sometimes protecting the innocent means sacrificing the guilty, even when the guilty is someone you love. I'd make that choice again 1,000 times. Because Grace gets to be a child. Emily gets to live without fear. Michael and Janet get to build their own families without the poison of abuse seeping into the next generation. And me. I get to sleep at night knowing I chose right over easy. Knowing I didn't look away. Knowing that when someone I loved needed me most, I showed up. That's what family is supposed to do. Not protect abusers, but protect the abused. Even when it breaks your heart. Even when it costs you everything. Because some people are worth saving. And some people aren't worth protecting. I just wish I'd learned the difference sooner. But I learned it when it mattered most. And that has to be enough. If you're reading this and you see yourself in Emily's story, if you're living with someone who hurts you, controls you, scares you, please know that you're not crazy. You're not alone. And you deserve better. It took Emily 6 years to leave. That's not a weakness. That's the insidious nature of abuse. It traps you, makes you doubt reality, isolates you, convinces you that you're the problem. You're not. If you need help, reach out. Call a domestic violence hotline. Tell a friend. Tell a doctor. Tell a teacher. Tell someone who will believe you. And if you're the person being told, believe them. Don't make excuses for the abuser. Don't suggest couples therapy or working it out. Don't tell them what they could have done differently. Just believe them. Help them. Protect them. That's all Emily needed. Someone to believe her. Someone to help her fight back. Someone to choose her over her abuser, even when that abuser was family. I'm just glad I could be that person, even if it meant losing a brother. Because in the end, he wasn't my brother anymore. He was just another abuser who'd finally faced justice. And that's exactly what he deserved.